I'm now joined by Richard Burnett, Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association, who's been very closely involved with this Microlise event today, and you were talking on the environment panel this afternoon, I believe. Earlier on, we had a representative from Client Earthing talking about the court cases that they've been pursuing against the UK government for its lack of action on air quality. Now, one thing he's very keen on is that the government, central government, takes a bigger role in setting out a clear policy rather than devolving it down to the 32 or 33 cities.
Yeah.
Now, obviously for operators, the last thing they want is a patchwork of different zones. So would you agree with Client Earth on that the government needs to take a far bigger role in setting out a policy framework?
I would absolutely agree with that. I think, you know, from my perspective, I've had meetings with Michael Gove, with David Rutley, with Jesse Norman and Chris Grayling about this issue, and we've talked about the completely unjoined up approach that the government are driving on clean air, and this devolved approach is just creating complexity across the country. No standard way of doing things, no standard format, and we've got this patchwork that's being created where operators are going to have to change what they do or how they approach things in various cities, and this penal approach as well in terms of charging is the last thing that we want. You know, we're a marginal industry where if you're an average operator that maybe makes £60 per truck per week, a charge of £50 or even £100 to come into London is going to put businesses out of business, or people are just not going to go there if they can't pass that charge on. So, you know, where we've had success with Southampton, for instance, and with Nottingham, where we've talked about doing things in a different way, where there is no charging, but they're kind of looking at it where they can actually expand, you know, the delivery times, but also focus on different modes and nodes of transport that are creating, NOx, means that it's been a far more proactive kind of conversation. But those conversations with Leeds, for instance, are really challenging and very difficult. So I think I've tried to push that, you know, certainly in the conversations I've had with government, and, you know, we just keep hitting a brick wall. So I wholeheartedly agree.
Yes. I mean, Euro 6 diesel seems to be going to be acceptable for most of the clean air or low emissions zones, but other places want to go further and go for these zero emissions or ultra low emissions. Now, there is one electric vehicle here today, but you can't go down to your local dealer and buy an electric vehicle right now. So the industry's been forced to adopt a technology which isn't really ready yet, is it?
No, look, it absolutely isn't ready. We heard some, you know, fascinating presentations, you know, from MAN today about the electric trucks that they've built and they've launched in Austria. You know, the cost of each of those trucks is £400,000. An operator that's going to go and buy those trucks, and even the manufacturers that need to get themselves ready to actually produce and put them into the market, there just isn't sufficient time to be able to do that, you know, within the realms of time that we've got. But I think, you know, the other element that you've got to consider is that if you look at the whole truck fleet within the UK market, we've got something like 498,000 trucks currently, and there's about 170,000 of those that are Euro 6. So we've still got an enormous number of trucks that we need to kind of change, and bearing in mind most of the market is actually SME, and, you know, there's no support or help to actually change these trucks financially, and the second-hand market is basically destroyed because of what's happened. This is a real, you know, I guess big issue for our industry to kind of face into. So we've got to find a way through it. Yes. And we've got to find a way, you know, ultimately, if we're going to have to take those charges, then they're going to have to be passed on. Retailers, manufacturers are going to have to pick up that cost while there is an evolution, while there is the changing process of actually, you know, getting more Euro 6 trucks into the market.
Yes. What's the right mechanism, do you think? Is it some sort of scrappage scheme? Is it some sort of financial support on the cost of the vehicle? Or is it just simply giving people more time to adapt to the new regime rather than forcing these things through in a year and 2 years' time, which is making life very difficult for people to invest?
Well, we've talked about more time. We need more time as an industry to be able to kind of change. We're being forced in a very narrow window to change the way in which we operate the trucks that we require to do that. And that's financially really, really challenging. You know, one of the things that we talked about on the panel before was, you know, even if this technology came in, that, you know, the electric trucks came in sooner, the challenge for smaller operators to go to their banks and say, look, there's a lifetime cost here which actually might provide me a saving, but the upfront cost means I've got to borrow more money upfront to actually purchase these trucks. is going to be a real challenge as well. So there are lots of dynamics kind of playing out here. And I don't think there's a silver bullet. There's no easy solution, but time would allow operators to, to change in a more sensible sort of approach.
I went to an event at Birmingham, and the City Council there was talking about getting a financial package of measures from central government to help its local operators upgrade their vehicles. And I think it was something like £15,000 a truck. But as you say, if you're trading up from a Euro 4 to a Euro 6, £15,000 is not going to touch that, is it? It's a huge financial investment you're asking companies to make.
It absolutely is, but part of the issue that we're facing here is that they're not being educated properly. They're not listening. They're comparing us to the bus market, and there may be retrofits that you can put into a bus, but there are no retrofits available for HGV vehicles. So you're right. That £15,000 is a drop in the ocean when you're trying to kind of change your fleet and look at kind of scaling up. A real big issue.
Yes. Just turning aside from the environment for a second, we've been talking a lot today about driver shortages and things like that, and the apprenticeship levy and how the apprenticeship levy isn't working to help bring new people into the industry. Where are we with the apprenticeship levy in your discussions with government to try and get that logjam free, to get some of that money released as emergency training funding?
Well, there's an enormous amount of frustration, I think, in the industry. Some of the big operators have reached out to me literally within the last few weeks, talking about look, we've paid so much into the levy. I think it's something like £280 million as an industry we have paid in, and we've managed to draw down 12. Those numbers are eye-watering, and it's becoming a tax, and the industry certainly feels that it's a tax. And if we don't do something quickly, then that money's going to disappear come the end of May. So we're working hard with the industry to try and get the Chancellor around the table, but with the Secretary of State for Education and also DFT, Chris Grayling, to talk about how do we get this levy to work for our industry. And going back to I guess the points that I was making before about the commerciality of where we sit. Most transport companies don't have other work for those guys or apprentices, to do. And so before they get their license, they're going to be unproductive. And when you're only earning, £60 profit per truck per week, then how on earth can you actually pay for an apprentice to actually do unproductive work? So this is where we've got to work hard with government and say, look, the shape of this for our industry needs to change. So you support us by bringing, we'll bring apprentices on board, but maybe you need to fund the first 11 or 12 weeks. And those are the conversations that we've been having on the back of Road to Logistics, to say the shape of this to make this work, and for, to allow us to actually take people from a more diverse background will mean that government have to kind of support this in a different way. The conversations that I've been having with Jesse Norman and with the Secretary of State around Road to Logistics are progressing really well. And there's been some dialogue this week where I think we're in the last throes of hopefully being promised something for a pilot, a significant pilot, to trial a stepped up version of Road to Logistics to really prove the concept and demonstrate that it works. So I think we're making progress, but it's slow. And that's probably because government is in paralysis, Parliament's in paralysis, and we know what the reason behind that is. But we've got to get that blockage out of the way, and we've got to start focusing on issues that are really affecting the economy and our industry, I think.
But is the fundamental problem is that the apprenticeship levy is aimed at funding apprenticeships, and perhaps apprenticeship is not the right vehicle for recruiting and training drivers?
Well, look, I think it's one element. I think it's one element of where we need to kind of resolve this problem. Another great presentation was Adrian Jones from Unite today, talking about how do we work more collectively as an industry. And one of the conversations that I had with him afterwards was about, look, there's no one single thing here that's going to solve this problem. It needs to be a package of measures that tackle all of those combined issues. The image of the industry, the image of I guess people's perception, why would they want to join this industry, is something that we've got to come together and we've got to solve collectively. But then, outside of that, we've also got terms and conditions. We've got the issues of salaries, and the big thing that I keep talking about is a truck driver average earnings 28 to 35,000. These days, you can drive a train 32 hours and get 52,000. So why would you want to come into our industry when we're competing against other sectors? Retailers and manufacturers over a period of time have actually done a really good job of screwing rates down, and I think there has to be an acceptance that rates are going to need to go up in order to accommodate those salary changes that I think we need within this sector. But then we've got to concentrate on all the other elements. How do we attract more women into the industry? How do we provide safe places to park? If you're on a night out, the facilities, the standard facilities, all of that needs to be addressed and resolved, and it's that package of measures that I think we need to work on together.
Well, the sad thing is, this is not new. We've been talking about this for a long, long time, improving the image of the industry. And someone was on one of those working groups and said, if we had 3 million quid, we could go out and do some image raising things. But this industry, as you say, it's not a hugely profitable industry. It's not a huge amount of spare cash washing around to do some sort of really high profile campaign. So it's nice to say, let's change the image of the industry, but in practice, how can that be done?
I think we've got to work together. We've got to come together, and we haven't been brilliant at that, over the years. I would agree. We've been talking about this for way too long, but this is really about what you put in is what you get out, and this is about a coordination of message. And I think for me, in terms of trying to get that message across to government, certainly in terms of influencing government and then the general public, this is really about the industry engaging and actually realising that if you don't kind of help support us with that lobbying and campaigning, then we're kind of toothless in a sense. We've got to be able to coordinate and bring that message forward to make sure that we're getting the right support in order to change those elements. So I think some of this is within our gift, if that makes sense, Steve, that we really have got to work harder together and understand that actually that kind of campaigning and bringing the message forward is not a waste of time, but it's about coordinating everybody at the same time together.
Yes. But I think the industry has to change internally. It needs to have a good look at itself, because it's all very well going out and saying, let's change the image of the industry. Well, the actual fact is, we all know that driving a truck can be a bit of a crap sort of job, because you don't get respect from your transport manager, you don't get respect from the client when you go and deliver it to an Amazon DC, they put you in a cage. Yeah. So there's no point going out to the wider public and saying, this is a great place to work, if we all take a damn good look at ourselves and go, well, it isn't. You're getting paid £10.40 an hour and you're treated like an animal in some places.
And that's why I think there's a part to play for the trade associations within this, to really forcefully say to the retailers and manufacturers that they have to accept there has to be change in order for us to support the backbone to UK PLC. Look, I absolutely agree, but I think what's really interesting about where I sit and where I used to sit, as an operator, when you're an operator, your head's down, you're delivering the day-to-day issues, you've got all of those day-to-day issues hitting you literally hourly, daily, weekly. And I think that's a real challenge for us to be able to step up above all of that and actually look out strategically. Now, for bigger businesses, it's probably easier to do that. Yes. But for so many smaller businesses, when you're literally at the heart of what's going on, that's a real challenge. And 55,000 of the overall operators in the UK have got 5 trucks and less, and 29,000 of those have got 1 truck. Yes. So these people are literally just at the heart of what's going on every single day. Yes. And it's very difficult, as I say, to lift yourself out of that, to be able to focus on the bigger picture. Yes. So I think that's where we've got to play a role collectively to try and coordinate that.
Yes. And is that what Road Logistics is trying to do, trying to provide some sort of mechanism to get the industry together and try and address some of these issues? Is that, and what's it doing in practice to actually achieve all that?
So the purpose of Road Logistics is to create a kind of almost a platform to be able to drive and coerce and bring people in, attract people, but from different diverse sectors. Again, we've got the lowest levels of unemployment for 43 years. So where do we get people from? We're going to need to look at ex-offenders, I guess the prisons, long-term unemployed, but more women. And if we're going to do that, and we're going to attract them through something like Road Logistics, then we need to also fix the problems that you've rightly highlighted and pointed out to say, if you don't fix those problems back within your business, how are you going to attract other people in?
Yes.
But that's a vehicle, road to logistics is going to be a vehicle to provide a kind of one-stop shop where hauliers will be able to come to us,
Yes.
and we'll be able to kind of introduce people, but then embed them within their business, but also support them with the apprenticeship program to get fully trained drivers.
As you say, these people need a certain degree of hand-holding, don't they? They need help.
Yeah.
Is that something which you're able to provide people if they come to you and say, we'd like to do this, we'd like to introduce more female drivers, go after a different population to recruit from? Is there any help available, practical help, rather than just, here's a leaflet, go off and do it yourself?
Yeah, so part of the pilot that we've talked to government about around road to logistics is demonstrating that this isn't easy. And it's also recognising that there is a level of hand-holding that you have to do, both with the individuals, but also with the business afterwards. And we've got to be able to kind of, take those people forward and challenge and deal with the issues that arise from taking people from some of the areas that we've talked about. But as we get this pilot off the blocks with government support, I think we will have the structure in place to be able to do exactly that. And we've got a team of people already within the RHA that are capable of guiding and talking through how you access some of it now anyway.
Yes.
So, we're here to help.
Yes. I had a lady for the DVSA enforcement unit in earlier on. Do you still feel that the DVSA is doing enough to clamp down on substandard foreign vehicles and drivers coming to the UK? Do we have a level playing field? Because that is the thing which is depressing rates, keeping wages low, is unfair foreign competition. Do you think enough has been done to stop that?
No. I think, frankly, if we look at the sort of austerity that we've been through, we're seeing a lot of cost measures, within government, and we're seeing departments that are being affected by some of these elements. So have they got sufficient people on the ground to tackle these issues? No. Are the structures in place to do it? I don't think so. And, I guess the whole purpose of earned recognition is to make sure that we're not stopping good operators, so that we have targeted enforcement on those operators that are the true cowboys.
Yes.
But and you're right, that certainly includes European operators, and I don't think we're doing enough about it. And if you look in the press this week about the sort of super police trucks that are out on the roads in partnership with Highways England, we absolutely support. Yes. They're picking up on an enormous number of drivers that are breaking the law while they're driving, but actually there's a fair proportion of those that are European.
Yes. Right, before the ceiling caves in, one final question. We tried to avoid Brexit at the proceedings today, but I can't let you go without mentioning it. Is it a cock-up, or is it just a complete conspiracy that the UK seems to be staggering towards either staying in or coming out without a deal? Perhaps the worst of both options, I don't know.
God only knows. I mean, I haven't got my crystal ball with me today, so I'm not quite sure. I mean, let's face it, it's been a complete and utter disaster. I think the division within Parliament, the division within government has just created this absolute mess. I think we've worked really hard collectively as an industry to say, look, if you don't get this right, these are the implications of it. So I think we've got that message across to say this isn't straightforward. But what the solution is, and as we look at the political playing field at the moment, God only knows how this is going to play out over the next sort of few months. But something is going to have to give. But as we sit here today, you just can't see anything kind of working through. That's really frustrating, I think, for all of us, and it's creating too much uncertainty. We need that clarity as soon as possible.
There's a lot of uncertainty around about a lot of things at the moment.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you, Richard D. It's been
pleasure.
Good to talk to you. Thanks
Great
for your time.
to talk to you.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
And I think, as you can see behind us, that is more or less it for the Microlise Transport Conference. Thank you and goodbye.